All right. Well, welcome to our final morning of our challenge week. You guys have made some awesome progress. It was wonderful seeing your applications last night. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity with Dr. Keith Trnka in the house to be able to ask your questions about AI. How does it do what it did? What do you want to, any details that you want as far as AI? It's your opportunity to ask our expert and be able to get some feedback as to how AI, why AI, what AI, and anything in between. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Keith to direct and uh, to go through any questions that you guys have. And thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, happy to help. And I'm a pretty informal person with these things, so feel free to just blurt stuff out. I will actually remember to have the chat open and I'll keep a look at that too. So I see Eric's got his hand up. Go for it.
Thanks, Keith. Yes, so this project was eye-opening because I'm new to coding and I made the choice to just completely ignore AI and build my knowledge up from just hard work. I just kind of got on HackerRank and I just would grind through the problems and this project got me to realize how amazing AI can code. It was so impressive just seeing cursor fly through it, and it had minor faults, but it was so intuitive. It was so incredible. I don't know. I My goal was to be like an AI generalist that kind of wrangles AI going forward, but I'm just so impressed with how good it is now. Can you imagine how good it's going to be in 3 or 5 years? Um, I don't know how much wrangling a really good coder will be able to be in the near future. What are your thoughts? It was very cool to see, but a little depressing. And
Yeah, it's a common reaction. So you're not alone. I think everybody, their first thought, they're like, whoa, whoa. I thought that was what I did.
right, right.
Yeah, so it's a good question. First caveat, I love to say this every time. Nobody knows the future. I try not to pretend to. Um, so in terms of where things are going, let me lay out some of the areas where AI coding has made a lot of progress and some of the areas where it hasn't made a lot of progress. And I think that'll help illuminate the trajectory, right? What we can expect. The stuff where it hasn't made a lot of progress, I'm a little bit less optimistic because the companies are typically doing the same thing that they were doing last year and the year before. It's just they have more data, more compute, more funding. So areas where it's made more progress is, it's way better at making JavaScript, Python, HTML, stuff that's actually well-formed code. Like a couple years ago, probably 50-50 whether it runs through the interpreter or compiles at all, like even for simple tasks. Now that's generally not a worry. Um, More complex tasks, if you give it kind of like a high level thing, like an actual programmer is given in industry, um, that one I've found is the 50-50 kind of thing. And even when it does work, it may not have done it the way you wanted to because you didn't actually explain why you wanted it to. Areas where I would say AI is not as good. So maybe a middle ground where like not as good but progressing is and I think some of you have seen this really is like doing simultaneous edits across lots and lots of files for a long time. That was just like you just didn't want to try it because it was so bad. And now, Cursor is getting better at these things. Some of the IDEs are much better at these things. So that's making progress. I expect that to continue making progress. Some of the areas where there's starting to be progress, but not much, is integration with third-party tools. So a good example is connecting to, like if you have a to-do list or a ticketing system, that has rich information that is essential on the job for you to actually build things the way that you're supposed to be building things, right? Right now, I haven't seen systems that integrate with that, or they say that they do, but they don't actually look at it. And so I think that'll make progress. Areas where I will say AI hasn't made as much progress, um, less common programming languages, less common programming frameworks. So AI is going to do better the more data there is online about it. And so actually I was helping a company out. They needed to improve their AI coding at COBOL. Well, there's not much COBOL on the internet. So, you know, that's a little bit of a challenge, right? If the data is not out there, their whole recipe is download, as much of the internet as you can, filter it to the good stuff, train the AI to be sort of to understand what that looks like. So COBOL is probably still going to be a challenge, unless we start seeing droves of people on COBOL, on GitHub or something like that. So I think that'll still be a challenge. There'll still be areas where, like a new programming framework, I have this all the time. I'm using one for entity merging called Splink. AI doesn't really know much about it. So when you're kind of at the forefront of a lot of things, or you're using an uncommon technology, yeah, it's not going to be as helpful. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon because these are typically small markets where it's not really worth OpenAI spending $100 million to fix that, you know. Um, so those will probably be neglected still. The other really big area, um, sometimes I call it the translation problem. So this is sort of how do you take a high level goal like a business goal to, a mid-level goal like a feature or a project goal, and how do you translate that into code? Um, that whole thing, AI is so about that. So wish I had a great example for you, but that's typically that's where most of the hard work in industry comes from is just like clarifying like what are we doing and why are we doing it? Are we sure we really want to do that? Is it worth 3 weeks? Is it worth 3 months? Is it worth 3 years? Like it's just really being like, hey, like let's stop and think for a second here. So there's a lot of value in those types of things. But to your point though, I think what you're seeing is that directing AI is a skill. Having been in management, it is somewhat similar to the skill of managing or leading or coaching like an intern, like someone that can program but doesn't understand how industry works, doesn't understand the goals, doesn't understand like, hey, you should probably write some tests first instead of like dumping, like a giant thing and then do tests later, right? And so I think those skills are super useful. Um, I don't see some of that stuff going away because the reason this is sort of why I'm getting to, what is sort of safe in the long term, right? Um, this sort of translation problem of going from like a high level goal to mid level to what actions you should do, planning for the future, that sort of thing. There isn't a good data source for truth there. There isn't a good data source for like what is the right best decision. A lot of times you do something in business, it works. It might not have much to do with the code you wrote. Maybe it was going to work anyway. Maybe you got lucky. Or it fails, and sometimes that has to do with the code you wrote, sometimes it doesn't. Um, but you don't find out for like a year until after you've written the code. So we don't have this frequent feedback signal to connect business goals to programming goals. A lot of the stuff in these areas where we don't have data for it are areas where AI has kind of hit a wall. And this is sort of from friends that are kind of in the inside on some of these companies. Like that's why they're focusing so much on like Math Olympiad, is because there's objective truth. And it's something that they can iterate on quickly. Same thing with physics and stuff. So where there's things where it's like not clear what the right thing is, where that's the hard work, that's going to be a while, I think. Sorry, that was kind of a long roundabout one. Let me get to some of the chat questions and then sort of circle back.
Thanks for answering my question, by the way.
Yeah. If you got follow-ups, feel free to like jump in or just drop in the chat or something.
Will do.
Mm, let's see. How can I give the HTML, CSS, JS, and it decides to use none of it and write its own thing based on phantoms? Look, I'm just gonna say someone wrote a bad AI. They, Like that's it's just doing a bad job. Sometimes people write code that's bad. Um, AI developers are not immune from that. Um, so it's at its core, just I'll give you the real brief high level, right? At its core, it's using a language model. Language models are, I like to explain them as consistency engines. They try to generate things that are consistent with what they have already. When you're talking about AI, they kind of refine that to be, how can we be more consistent with instructions or questions or, code or stuff. But yeah, I would say that sometimes you just get unlucky. I had one the other day where it just barfed and started messing up all the syntax, nothing compiled anymore. Like this is Python, right? It's like indentation's simple in Python, but to AI, indentation is actually a little bit, they're not really built to see white space as much, so who knows? But sometimes they just don't do well.
All right.
Uh,
So
oh,
there
go ahead.
there's there's nothing that I can do. Like I can't tell it to like use this exclusively to stop it from doing that then.
So one thing,
Just
generally, so I'll say it could be about the core, the AI part, like the LLM part, or it could be about the integration into the development environment. And so I see this with Visual Studio Code where for a lot of the AI, a lot of the LLMs that I pick in that, I have to tell it which files to look at, and if I don't, it'll start doing weird stuff. So I'm not an expert in all of the IDEs, so I can't really give you tips on that, but I would say you can play around with the IDE a little bit. Another thing that you can do to try out is you can, most of them will accept persistent instructions. And so you can try to refine your persistent instructions, like review all the existing code first before you start coding, things like that. That'll help like anchor it on that a little bit. But um, there's no like 100% surefire one that I have on that because it varies from IDE to IDE. Sorry, I cut you off there. Was that was what you were getting at though, right?
yeah, yeah, because I just ran into that right before this. It's like, dude, I gave you everything and you're barfing out HTML and it's like dude, it's over in the JavaScript. It's you even said it's being dynamically created and it forgotten. It's like, "Oh, thank you for refreshing me." Oh God.
Yeah. Actually, I've had in some situations, if I'm in a thread, like in a conversation, and the conversation gets too long, then it starts, because the conversation context is going past the context window for the underlying large language model, and it has to do a bunch of fancy stuff to deal with that. So periodically, you don't want to keep a particular discussion going too long. That can cause some of these issues. Um, and then the other one, actually, this is probably good advice in general, but just commit often, so that you have some good points to go back to.
All right, I'll have to take that forward with me then, is to not look, because some of my conversations get really long, and I think that's probably what's happening. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I would give that a shot. And like a lot of things, I would say if it's a change to a workflow, try it for a few days, sort of see if it makes an actual difference, and then kind of decide. You don't want to try it for just like an hour, but like try it for a few days, and then see if that works out. Going down through comments here. Let's see. AGI in the next 5 years? I have no idea. I all right, I'm gonna try not to rant, but this is difficult for me not to rant. Um, Look, people don't know what they mean by AGI. So if we don't have a clear, like, very clear definition of this thing, then people that want to sell more things can say, yes, we made AGI. People that are, regulators or researchers are going to say, no, we don't have AGI. But like, we don't even have a clear term for what that means. Um, so AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. people colloquially mean it to be a some sort of AI that can do any kind of intelligence related task that a human can do, colloquially. Um, but then they say, oh, well, accept anything physical. Oh, well, accept anything that requires external knowledge. Oh, well, accept this, accept that. And then, if it doesn't do things quite like a human, does that count or not? Who knows? So I'm much more interested in competency. So, if it's ability to complete specific types of tasks, so coding competitions, um, I will say coding competitions are pretty artificial, compared to like industry work, which involves a lot of guesswork, a lot of communication, a lot of hard things. Um, so if we have AI that, is unbeatable at coding competitions, I wouldn't say that that is an indication we have a replacement for industry software engineers. Just because the typing code part, while it's difficult, um, it's a skill that can be learned, it can be improved, it can be honed. Communication is one of those just fundamentally hard skills. Uh, if I had a class that would just instantly improve my communication skills, that would be probably worth a lot of money. I'm sure a lot of people sell a class like that. I don't know if it works for everybody though. Um, yeah, let me try keep going through the comments here. Yeah, yeah, integration's tough. Yeah, more like a senior. Yeah, so I think it's good to treat it kind of like a junior developer or like someone learning. And I mean this in a couple ways where for one, you have to be, and this is the same in management. You have to be thinking about um what a person is capable of. If you just in management, if you give someone a task that is well beyond their capabilities, a lot of people get discouraged. Um, they don't know what to do. They have, some people have panic attacks. All kinds of things go wrong. You don't want to give people tasks that are way too easy for them either, because then you're spending all this time explaining things, right? Or you don't want to give them do this, 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 because then you're taking away their agency. Um, that's for a person that's learning and growing. AI is not really learning and growing out of these things, but um, I think you want to be thoughtful about times where you've seen AI succeed and fail in the past, sort of calibrate to its level of capabilities. You want to explain context behind the why of what you're doing things so that it can try to fill in the blanks. This is the same for, when we're getting directions as engineers, it helps to get a lot of context. Like, why are we building this thing? How important is security in this thing? How important is scalability in this thing? How important is uptime? Like, you make 100 little decisions between every time you talk to a PM or, someone in your product leadership, right? You have to make all these tiny little decisions. You don't always realize you're making all these decisions, but you got to make all of these decisions as you're going through the development, and that can lead to it feeling like a high quality piece of software or kind of an inconsistent, janky piece of software. And so same deal goes with AI. Try to provide context on why you're doing, and then calibrate your level of instructions to what you've seen it succeed and fail at. So in my case, if I've seen it not do so well in if I just give it like a high level business thing, like say extract the information from this web page and store it in structured data, something like that. Um, really, I'll do much better if I say, okay, here's a URL. Let's start off by running a curl command. Then I want you to look at the file. Then I want you to propose the data model and review it with me. And then we're going to pause at that point, and then we'll proceed. And so then we iterate on the data model, and then I say, okay, now I want you to write unit tests for the thing that we're about to build. Then I want you to build the extractor. And since it has unit tests, it'll be like, okay, let me run the unit test, right? So you kind of like put little guardrails there, right? You have to kind of know what guardrails the model needs for its level of capability. Some models need a lot more, some need a lot less. Unfortunately, that means you have to kind of get used to each one, which is why like advice for one doesn't always translate to advice for others. But anyway, yeah, yeah. Think about it like a junior developer. That's helpful. Yeah, hallucinating an AI. Um, Rebecca. That's another one that's kind of a vague term, but it's generally speaking, hallucinating is when it makes stuff up. Um, it's it's a little bit of a tricky term because it's a hallucination engine, right? It's there to create text that's consistent with stuff that came before it. It's not necessarily there to be super factual. It's actually hard work for it to be super factual, to say things that are only in the input. It's not built for that. Um, it's built to try to memorize the entire internet. You know, and like what sentence type tends to come after another sentence, what statement tends to come after another statement, what piece of code comes after another piece of code. So it's really designed for that. Um, but yeah, so like hallucination, I will say there's an interesting when you're thinking about writing directions for AI, there's an interesting part about it, which is that, and we can bring this back to the junior dev analogy. When someone doesn't tell you what to do, you have to take a best guess, right? And we could call that hallucination. We don't call it a hallucination for real people. We only call it hallucination for AI. But sometimes it just wasn't, you got a ticket or you got some description. The info wasn't in there. And so you take your best guess. AI, a person usually will double check those guesses with someone else. AI is just gonna say like, all right, I'll take my best guess and keep going. So, and that's how it starts to get pretty bad, is if it makes one guess, keeps going, makes another guess, keeps going, makes another guess, keeps going, and after it's filled in the blanks for 10 different things, you can be way off track from what you had intended because it was filling in the blanks to the best of its ability. Um, and that's another reason why just providing more context can help. Oh yeah, yeah, we were just talking about hallucination. Uh, catch up. What was the base language using in like the base programming language or human language? Sorry, it's scrolling around here. And that was from Adrian. Oh, programming language. So a couple different languages. I would say most people that work in the AI space use Python. That's just been the history for a while. Um, when we're doing the building of these things, they take a lot of computation. It takes a lot of heavy stuff. That's why NVIDIA is in the news all the time because all these things are using tons and tons of graphics cards. Graphics cards are used because they do massively parallel programming, massively parallel operations. They make linear algebra faster if you're into math. And because they're good at linear algebra, we found a way to use linear algebra to do machine learning, and now everything uses it. And so uh, Python is not the fastest programming language. And so what I'm getting to is that researchers generally like to stay on the Python side of things, but to actually make these things run fast, it's Python calling into like C or Fortran or C++ or Rust into a compiled, highly optimized language. And so that's one of the like mm, uncomfortable things about modern machine learning and AI is that you try to stay in Python, but you couldn't possibly do it in just Python. It's like calling other stuff under the hood. And so sometimes you see like very mysterious looking errors that don't look like Python errors. Those are usually errors from like any of the lower level languages below. Um, did I say COBOL before? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so AI is no one's well, I don't think you could be the first person to implement machine learning and large language models in COBOL, I guess. I don't think anybody's done that yet, but I could be wrong. Um, yeah,
No,
but AI,
sorry, I
oh, go ahead.
thought you said that Python would need C or C++, and then you said COBOL or Pascal
Oh,
or Fortran.
Fortran, yeah,
Fortran, sorry, because
yeah.
that's all I
They're all
learned
very
all
old,
these
right?
languages many
Yeah.
years ago. So it's
Yeah.
Fortran. Okay.
Yeah, it's
It's
kind of funny. So Fortran is falling out of favor. I think because it's older, not a lot of people use it. And but the reason why it's stuck around is because it is very fast at like numeric programming. And there are books in it and all these things. And a lot of people that come from like a physics background or a chemical engineering background, some of these backgrounds are they've been trained up in Fortran because they need to do, complex, particle simulations, all kinds of stuff. And so Fortran is actually pretty fast at these things. And so sometimes you'll see machine learning that uses Fortran um, under the hood.
I
Um,
can't believe it.
yeah, I know. I try not to think about it too much. Because, I mean, if it breaks, there's not much I can do.
Isn't Fortran and COBOL in the same generation
I think in the same generation, but very different angles. So Fortran went the angle of scientific computing, and then COBOL was more for the business stuff.
for the
Yeah.
banking? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, I think COBOL is kind of hot right now because probably this is speculation on my part, but
Hmm.
because the US government has an enormous number of systems built in COBOL.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to adopt AI to try to help them maintain things or improve things. Except the AI is not good at COBOL. So they have an urgent need. Let's see. Yeah, let me try to catch up on a couple questions from chat and then hopefully we can swing back to in-person question. A lot of people come from tech support, sysadmin backgrounds, can make some suggestions into transitioning into an AI ML centric career path for people with this background. Um, I don't think I have like great advice. I would say that transitioning from one discipline, one study to another is hard. So I just want to sort of say there's like I haven't really seen like a cheat code or anything like that. The closest thing to a cheat code is folks that are in a job for the thing that they have a lot of experience with, and then they find areas to explore a new technology within that job. Sometimes they can. So I knew someone that was doing full stack work, and the roadmap was kind of delayed, and so what they did, they wanted to learn some, applications of AI and large language models. So what they did was they said, okay, well, I think we're having this problem in the business. Let me propose a project to use AI and large language models. I'll work on it for a week or two. I'll demo it to some people internally and advocate for it. Um, and then that was able to get her from like, okay, I've done tutorials to like, oh no, this is actually starting to become a real project and like starting to get real feedback on it. And a lot of the hard part in transitioning careers is sort of like getting your first couple wins, I should say. Your first couple things on your resume where you've done like real work that real people have used because taking a class, is not really enough to make a resume stand out against other folks. It's really like, do you have practical experience? It's in some area, and so if you can do it in a job, that'll usually that'll help. But it's like kind of not every job's going to have those opportunities. Um, Other than that, it's the usual stuff. People doing side projects. Networking, of course, right? To try to meet people in the space that might be hiring. Um, but yeah, it's tough. I'm not that's definitely not my ex area of expertise of like how to get into an industry. Um, it's tough. Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you. Uh,
That's fair, Keith. The reality is that I thought you might have some insights that you could share with us because I mean you weren't a machine language guy forever in industry. You started out in college and maybe had to do
yeah.
a transition or two of your own.
Yeah, I could tell you my transition. So I started off, so my PhD work is in language modeling, but this was, like smaller ones that we could run on like the dinky computers we had back then. And it's for people with disabilities that they would like type and would kind of like speak, that kind of thing. Um, and So I transitioned from that to typing on mobile phones. And so that's not much of a transition at all, really, as it turns out. Um, but that gave me the experience with like just working in industry, learning more programming languages, like how do things work and such. We went through an acquisition at Nuance, and that wasn't too great for me. But at some point I started to see like I had expected that I would learn on the job, and I saw that I wasn't really learning on the job. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do, work on the side and stuff, with side projects and such to learn in different areas. So that got me to learn how to make Android apps, some other things. Then when I was looking for jobs, I saw there aren't actually that many, back then there weren't that many language modeling jobs. So I said, okay, well, if I broaden into machine learning generally, then that'll help me out because there's more jobs in general for that. And so I tried taking on some projects that were in more adjacent spaces. So one was to do some on-device machine learning. One was in like data analytics. So I started to sort of explore different ideas to try to kind of broaden, um, what I was good at so that I would have more options when I was job seeking. And then that got me then tried doing a couple failed startups, joined health tech startup through a connection really. Used that to broaden my horizons more. So I had done natural language machine learning, but I hadn't done like image processing or anything. So I did some of that in the healthcare space. Um, did some, traditional like tabular machine learning, did, again, trying to broaden the things that I have experience with, just so that, I want to be able to show up to someone and say like, okay, you want someone with experience in these like 15 things. There isn't a person like that, or there's maybe like two in the world and they're not job seeking right now. But like I've got 10 of these things. Um, and so little by little over years was kind of like broadening my skill set once I had kind of expertise in that language modeling area. But yeah, that I would say was it. And then probably for me for the last few years, what I've seen, probably for the last call it like 5 years, what I've seen is that I'd kind of gotten to the point where the machine learning part was almost never the reason projects failed or companies failed. It was almost always integrating it into the larger system that took too long, and that's why things went badly, or something that was to do with um, how are we meeting a user's needs. And so more recently, I've learned a lot more about the integration piece. So learning more about C++ and Rust and Unreal Engine and all the other things. Um, so yeah, I guess you could say my career trajectory is like a when I tell it like that, it sounds quick, but we're talking like 15 years of like learning little by little and getting discouraged some months and doing nothing, and then bouncing back, and so just the constant struggle to broaden my skill set, I would say. Um, but I don't have a quick way. I wish I had a quick way for you. Um,
Well, thank you for that insight. The reality is this is software development is a tough road. There's no question about it, and I've seen plenty of people fail at it.
yeah, it's tough, and right now it's like people are tired of hearing it's a tough market compared to other markets I've been in. It's tougher. Um, I think everybody just wants to be through the other side to the good times again. Me too. Um, all right, so going down through the questions. Katrina asks, of the various AI tools out there, what are your favorite to use and for which tasks? Um, let's see. Maybe I'll just like do a mental survey of what I use. So I use Copilot in Visual Studio. Um, Lately, I've been having a great time using the agent mode with that in the Copilot chat using Claude Sonnet 4. Um, that's been doing, at least this week, it was doing a banger job until I ran out of credits or whatever. And then maybe I'll just chill out for the rest of the week or something. I don't know. I tried GPT 4.1, but it's just not even close for my particular use case. I find I have to very much give it tasks, like sort of smaller, well-defined tasks, whereas with Sonnet, sometimes I could give it probably 50-50 or 60-40. I could give it more high-level kind of features um, or refactors. Uh, for most personal stuff, I use Perplexity. So that's one of the ones that is based on web search. That's the reason that I like it. I am recently I decided to audit some of its citations and found that they were not as reliable as I thought they were. So that's kind of made me question everything about Perplexity because that's their thing. Um, and so right now I'm kind of in this phase of trying out. You can pick which model you want Perplexity to use. So I'm in a phase of like seeing, oh, if I switch the model part, maybe that'll improve the citations. The other ones that I used to use ChatGPT for a while. I canceled very recently because I wasn't using it as much as Perplexity or Copilot. And I found that the things that I would use ChatGPT for was like creative writing type stuff, like helping me revise phrasing of things. And then I would use O3 for any kind of thinking heavy tasks. So coming up with like a high level plan, like even in programming, it might be like, okay, here's what we want to do. How do we want to break it down into steps? And O3 I found was like the reasoning based models tend to be good for those kinds of things. I also use the reasoning based models like to help me identify sometimes my own blind spots. I find that can be helpful just to, like when you're working with people, other people will identify your blind spots kind of, you don't always have to even ask for that. It's just going to happen. With AI, you have to ask for it. Um, and so I find that can be helpful. And then do I use any others? That's pretty much the extent of it. The one other like unusual use case that I found was pretty interesting was using the voice mode with OpenAI. And I used it to prepare for like a VC call. So I said, okay, you're helping me prep for a VC call. Here's what I want to talk about. And with those things, like it's helpful to have a smooth description of what you're building, of why you're building out of this, that, the other thing, practice your answers to certain things. And so it can help give you that practice. People use it for interviews too. Um, I also wanted to try it out because I was like, oh, I'll put on my like headphones and go for a run and try it at the same time, And it was pretty fun. I wouldn't want to do that every day, so it's I don't know that it's worth like paying for though. Uh, let's see. Eric asked, "Do I ever experiment with the Chinese open source AIs?" I did for a bit. So there's two parts to it. There's the open source part and there's the Chinese part to it. When R1 came out, Perplexity integrated R1 pretty quickly into their backend models, and so that's that. Then I just like change a drop down, and then I can be using that one, and it was good. R1 was really good. Um, uh, I would say in terms of like how to use it, uh, I don't know I don't know the background of it too well, but I will say like anytime you're uploading like anything sensitive or personal into like a web UI, you just want to be thoughtful about, you know, what company is running this, do you trust them, and that sort of thing. And so that's come up in the news a bit more with some of the Chinese companies. I don't think all of them are, you're going to have some that play fast and loose with data, others that don't. So you just want to look into it if possible. The one great thing about open source is that someone else can host it. On the open source models, on open models, the one thing that I will say is that I went through a phase of curiosity about running local models. What I found is that for me, it's not worth the time because it might take me, like, say on this startup that I'm working on, we were using, I don't know, we tried out some of the Llama models, some of the Microsoft like Phi models, and they were okay, but getting Olama set up the same way on all of our computers takes a significant amount of time. Making sure we have scripts to make it reproducible in every environment takes a lot of time. And if you don't do that right, then suddenly something doesn't work, and now you're going to spend an hour or two debugging it. I'd rather, like our OpenAI spend is pretty low. I'd rather just, spend $5 on OpenAI and call it a day. So for my particular situation, um, the open models, although I appreciate them, I don't generally use them. Let's see. Russell asked, do I have tools, how to set up AI, best practices, anything like that? Um, yeah, so I would say most AI systems these days that are for coding have a way to have persistent instructions that are added to your custom instructions. In the sort of the GitHub Copilot family, it's like in the .github folder, and there's some special place you're supposed to put it. If it's OpenAI's Codex, it's like an agents.md. If it's, everyone has their own different place, so you got to look it up for your own one. I would say that once you've used it for a little bit, you should identify key things that you have to explain most times or every times and start to add that into your shared instructions. That does two things. One, you're not going to forget. Two, it's going to make sure that the development is more consistent every time you run into things through. So that'll help out. Uh, so that's a little bit of like how to do that. Ideally, what you should do is after having a session with AI, I'm trying to get AI to do this, but I failed horribly. So I have to do this myself still. Is after a session of coding with AI, so after a morning or so, I take a few minutes to reflect on, essentially a retrospective. What went well? What could have gone better? And I sort of say, okay, well, were there miscommunications that we had in this thing? And then I try to say, okay, how could I have prevented those? Were they preventable for one? And then if they were preventable, then I edit my persistent instructions with clarification that hopefully will avoid future getting off rails. And so try to be reflective about, how things are going, some ideas of how to do better. Put those things into your shared, like your Copilot instructions or Agents MD or whatever. So that can help. Another thing too is that I found if you can rely on testing, absolutely rely on testing. This is again with development, right? Like if you've been in a situation where you're developing a big project and you don't have tests, something breaks and you don't know what broke. Like it could be any number of things. And so you sometimes have to tell AI what kind of test you want. But once you've told an AI what test you want, then ideally you should be getting in a loop where it's like develop a little piece, then run the test, make sure we didn't break anything. Like the tests kind of keep it grounded in reality. And so like having the test being run in a loop, kind of like development, but having that being run will catch stuff before it goes too far off the rails. So that'll help a ton. Again, it's really just like taking a lot of these like, you know, best practices that you learn as a junior dev and sort of baking them into the AI a bit. The thing with the Copilot instructions, I guess maybe that's different than a junior dev, but um, kind of same in spirit. Um, let's see here. All right, Jess asks, I was a business data person for 10 years, experience in management, solving tech problems. Also used Python for data viz. Actually, telecom engineer. Can you recommend what I could do next in your career? Uh, I actually, I'm not actually good at that. I'm not actually good at that kind of advice. Um, I've had to learn this over the past year that I'm bad at giving that kind of advice. My mentality is some mixture of like, if you need money, you take what you can, and if you don't need money, like have some fun. Uh, that's kind of where I'm at. That's good advice for certain people, but I recognize that that is not good advice for everyone. And when I say fun, I mean some mixture of learning, people that you want to work with, problems that you want to work on, things that just seem exciting to you. I think, but this is again like something that happens. I think with age too is like we start off and we've got all these these bills and debts to pay off, right? And so like money is really important starting off, and then your salary starts increasing, and then that gives you a little bit of breathing room to say, well, what do I want to do? And so I'm more at the stage of life where it's like more, what do I want to do? What do I want to leave behind, kind of thing. Um, so I wish I had good advice, but I don't. Uh, let's see. I see Rebecca says something tougher than publishing. Actually, what did you mean by that?
I just you were talking about how earlier um you said de being a de what was it, being a developer or being in this industry as a in
Oh, yeah, yeah,
tough,
yeah.
and then I wrote tougher than publishing because that's my background, and been laid
Right.
off 3 times. And I guess in any industry, I guess being laid off is just the norm now. But I don't know, actually I think with me it was 3 strikes and kind of gave up. And now
Yeah.
I'm like switching gears. And then like it used to be very not ignorant, but like stubborn with coding, because my mom actually was a programmer. She started uh, as a secretary and took classes at Pace University, and actually worked on Y2K in Paris before retiring. And so that was kind of cool. But growing up as a kid and then she was like at the computer more than with us. And I
Mhm.
was like, I hate computers. I hate, but I got into publishing, and then I was a bit stubborn then too. I was like, but I want my period in my sentence to end right here. I don't want it to be over there. But I've come a long way from that. So, but then it's just, yeah, that was kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of a response.
No, so actually, I'm glad that you brought it up because it's a really good reminder. So I think what I want to say is that even though things are harder in software engineering right now than they were 2, 3 years ago, it's still like a better place to work than a lot of jobs, right? Like how many people in healthcare do you know that work 60, 80 hour weeks? Um, they do their job, then they go home and then they do the documentation, all kinds of really, people being pushed real hard. And so, um, and I think it's important to keep in mind, especially when talking to folks with a different background, like you say, because like every industry has a different level of toughness. Some are working you way more hours than you should be working. Some are you're dealing with all kinds of some industries tend to have a lot more discrimination than others, so you might be dealing with that. Like every industry's got its own situation. Um, and so when we're thinking about it being tougher, I think it's good to say like, hey, this is worse than it was before, but it's still a better opportunity than a lot of opportunities out there. Um, and so I'm glad that you called that up because I think it's important to um, keep that in mind when talking with folks that come from all different kinds of backgrounds, right? Because I tell you, once you start talking to people from other backgrounds, like there are a lot of hard jobs out there, I tell you. There are a lot of people that are like, you get to work from home and you're complaining, like you get to save money and you're complaining. So, uh, yeah, it's worse than it was, but it's not that bad. Let's see. So Suzanne says, I'm a physician and a coach here. Right on, right on. Uh, Either in helping offices get on board with EMR, serving as liaison to the UI and other meets. Okay. Ooh, this is such an interesting question. I don't have a real answer for you. I'll just give you a quick kind of couple things. So when I was at 98.6, we were doing healthcare technology. It was for primary care visits through your phone. Mostly we did it text only. There was some video and audio, but mostly text only. So this is, you would get this as a benefit through your insurer or through your employer. And we had physicians on staff that were sort of, they were taking those calls, taking those chats, working with patients. We also had physicians on staff that were helping us advise on how to build a product. So sort of like what you're talking about is like a liaison on input on the user interface. Um, we never had someone that both had the physician background and could program. Uh, I think that would have been pretty cool. It would have been pretty tricky to make it work. I think if you, so I don't know how you find the kind of role that you're looking for. But I think once you get into a role, I think you can provide a lot of value, but I'll give you just a couple like quick tips there. One of the things that I really learned from my time at 98.6 was that although there is some consistency in healthcare, different healthcare providers take a very different approach. That means that if you build software for one healthcare provider, it might not work at all for another one. And so it's actually, so a lot of people get into this kind of overconfidence trap where they think, oh, this is the way that we work, we'll just do it. And it turns out that for some kinds of medicine, maybe the providers aren't talking to each other as much, so they don't actually know what each other does, or they don't have experience in software. And so that was sort of like the insight you have in healthcare is hugely valuable because you face 100 decisions where you got to fill in the blanks throughout your day. And if you're filling in the blanks in a way that's consistent with healthcare, you're just going to do a better job. The work that you provide, the software that you build is going to need fewer changes down the line. With that caveat that, you have to make sure that you're supporting a wide range of providers. And that might take a little bit of um, uncomfortable conversations or humility and to say like, oh, well, this is how I work as a provider. How do you work as a provider kind of thing, to try to understand how do you build software for everyone. And it's hard to know. In some cases, we know a good decision versus a bad decision, but there also are some preferences and we don't necessarily have the data to know yet about what's best. Scrolling on down, Hope asks, what do I think about Grok? I Look, Grok was kind of a late comer to the game. To me, it looks like a company where they wanted another company in doing AI. They threw a lot of money at it. They've kind of cut back on a lot of their safety practices. So I don't have a great opinion of Grok. To me, it's kind of a sideshow. If Elon Musk weren't involved, I don't even think it would be in the news, frankly. Like, I think that's why Grok shows up in the news. Otherwise, it would just be like one of the thousand startups that aren't doing great. DeepSeek, uh, avoided it. Yeah, yeah. So I will say, um, if you're running it locally, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because it is auditable. And the things that run these things locally, um, like you can look into that. Um, it's more the stuff where it's hosted on their servers. That's the stuff where you really want to start to worry. Rebecca asks, any thoughts about ethical or sustainability in regards to AI and energy and water use to run it? Um, oh, and I can keep going. I think I'll just I don't know if we get booted off the call. I guess we get booted off the call, but I'll just keep going. Um, So in terms of sustainability, so the big energy cost is in training models. Using the models is actually not too draining. It's really the research that goes into building them. Um, I how do I feel about it? I feel conflicted about it. I mean, I don't have a say anyway, but like one thing that I don't like is that it makes for an uneven playing field in terms of research. So like academic researchers just can't do research on some of these things anymore because they don't have $10 million to try to train something. OpenAI can. And so that part I don't like. The energy and water use, I don't love, but I think that areas where I'm more, it doesn't bother me quite as much as like we have a lot of traditional industries that are heavy polluters. Like flying planes is a good example. Um, making steel is another good example. The areas where I'm optimistic about some of the AI power use are like Microsoft recently has they're a good example where they've tried to purchase, I think, one of the old shut down 3 Mile Island reactors. Nuclear is famously very or very environmentally friendly uh, if you can run it for 30 years. And so I'm optimistic about the companies that are trying to find green sources of energy for their data centers. So there's some out there. I think that's a cool direction. I think that'll help with the sustainability a lot um, because then they can sort of consolidate things. Does swearing at the AI help? I don't know. I like I I try not to think about it too much. I try because so actually so there's the joking answer, which is the like be nice to your future AI overlords. Um, but then there's the serious answer, which is our habits as we use them become easier and easier. If we develop the habit of cursing out something or someone every time we're angry, that becomes easier for us to do with other people. And so swearing at AI doesn't just affect the AI, it changes us. And so I would say be thoughtful about these kinds of behaviors because it can seep into like, oh, I didn't mean to curse you out. I do that with the AI. And it's like, well, you just did it with a person now. So um, this is not like my scare thing, but I would say I try not to. I try to be the same person everywhere if I can. Oh yeah, Y2K is a lot of fun. Let's see. Douglas asks, is it worth getting Microsoft, AWS, or Azure AI certifications too niche? Are there better things to focus on instead? Certifications, so those ones are going to be like cloud certifications. I would say, um, in general, it's going to give you more experience to try to build an actual project with things, compared to a cert. But if you're curious about certs or if you've had a good time before, like go for it. There are a number of ways to learn. Certifications that's one of them. So I wouldn't steer towards it or steer away from it. If you already have an interest towards certs, then go for it. You can learn some good stuff. Especially with cloud training, I find that that's hugely important for deploying things. And so it can actually really help you if you're interested in the part of deploying things, getting things to run in the cloud, getting it to operate 24/7 without downtime, that kind of thing. Um, so it depends a little bit on your interests, but that can be a good way to learn the cloud tech. Scrolling on down. Let's see here. Uh, is AI ML a space where you could work for a few months and then take a break, then work another contract or a gig? Or is it more kind of like constantly working? Um, oh, I wish. I think it's more like full-time roles where um, and if you have a good employer, they're very understanding about your vacations. If you have a bad employer, they're trying to like, oh, that's a really busy time. I don't know if you can take a vacation, so most roles are full-time. Uh, uh, I would love summers off. That's my dream. I'm still working on that one. I haven't gotten there yet. Um, Will there be a lot of job opportunities for people in spite of AI taking over? Anna asks this. I think so, but I don't know. This is one where I really don't know the future. This is one where I kind of look to the past a little bit of the history of technology. And the history of technology is that this kind of fear has happened many times over the last 150 years with, you know, industrial farming, with industrial manufacturing, with all different kinds of things. People ask basically the same question. And what's happened every time is that in the past is that jobs shift. It's not necessarily that jobs go, it's not necessarily that unemployment rate changes or anything. It's just that jobs shift. So there, an individual farmer might be farming, I don't know, maybe like 100 times more. Uh, they might produce 100 times more than someone, 150 years ago. So we don't have as many of them. But what that's looked like is kind of like a slow shift of productivity grows, farming jobs kind of slow down in growth. But since the population is growing at the same time, there's still demand for those jobs. And so it's not like a lot of these industries just tanked. There's some rare industries that did, but generally jobs shift. People gravitate naturally towards the jobs that are in growing areas. And so I don't, I worry about this a little bit, but not a lot, just for that historical view. I understand that people say, well, if we create AGI or something that can like replace humans at everything, but I don't know. People have been talking about that with me for at least 20 years or longer. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know. I'll worry about it once we get closer to it, maybe. Uh, let's see here. Oh, so Dan says that the Microsoft remodel, it's a separate company that Microsoft's contracting with. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Ton of sense. Oh, and then I'm like, I'm still catching up to where Katrina said last call for questions. Uh, let's see. Please close with the greatest need to be fulfilled by students wanting to get into AI. Ooh, I like this question. The greatest need. Um, I think I'm that age where I can be incredibly biased and just impart my worldviews, even if I don't know if it's predictive. I'll tell you where I want the next generation to go to and where I hope it goes to. So much of what I see is people, they're hyped up about AI. They throw AI at everything. Like, someone brought it up, right? Shoving AI down people's throats with like Klarna or these other things. Like, we didn't need that. Like, that wasn't a problem to solve. So I would say my biggest hope for the future is that the next generation of AI practitioners is really focused on building things that people want and need. Not doing it for hype, not doing it for technology, just like, and I will say this, like one way that my litmus test is I take a sentence with AI and I change it to Excel and I see if it still makes sense. If you're excited about the problem, you don't care if you're using AI or Excel. If it's something that someone actually needs, it does not matter. It's just a tool. If the sentence is completely nonsensical, when you take away the AI, well, guess what? You probably got hype, right? So this is my real one hope is that we have a generation of folks that say, okay, we have this tool. Like, how can we take this tool and build great software that actually solves people's problems, that enhances their lives, that respects people in technology, that respects people in people relationships? We don't need AI to replace relationships. We don't need AI to replace connections and belonging and conversations with people, right? We need AI to take care of all, scheduling. Crap. Like how many times you could socialize with someone if you could figure out the schedule, right? That's the hard part. Like help me with the schedule and get out of my way. I want to talk to my friend. I want to catch up with family. I want to have moments with people, right? We're human beings and like I want us to have more connections. want us to have more authentic human experiences. I don't want AI to be injected on top of everything where it does not belong. I want AI to be used to enhance our lives, to solve problems that actually are worth solving, right? And I think a lot of where I see this going wrong is people that are just like, oh, I can get more VC funding if I throw AI on it, or my board of directors won't fire me if I slap AI on it, or I'm I'll look smart if I which not really, but like it's like no, like try to solve real problems, try to do real good things, try to do good work, follow your convictions, and like use AI as a tool to accomplish that. AI should be secondary or tertiary. It should be way far down the list in terms of priorities compared to building software that actually solves real problems, that actually helps people in a meaningful way. So that's kind of my rant. Uh, you know, bring back the human experience, I guess. Uh, yeah, I
Thank
guess
you
that's
so, so much. That was fantastic. I loved all the questions that we were able to get through. That was a wonderful, wonderful time that we were able to have with you here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you everyone for showing up and asking your questions and being able to guide this discussion in many ways. I think that was an excellent way of closing it. Thank you, thank you. So today, guys, the rest of the schedule. If you guys have anything last minute that you guys want to polish before we deploy tonight with Braden, go ahead and work with your teams. Um, and get those pull requests put in, merge it into main, make sure you test it and that it's still working after that. And then tonight we're going to be deploying with Braden those projects that you made. Thank you so much for everybody coming and asking such wonderful questions. Thank you, Keith, for coming in and talking with us. That was wonderful, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. All right. Thank you so much. Happy coding, guys.